welcome to all of you, and I am pleased to introduce to you, all the way from Barrie, Gina Tron, world-renowned author, poet, essayist, editor, and educator. Gina, candidly courageous according to Interview magazine, is an accomplished author who does not shy away from tough topics in any genre. She's here with us tonight to talk about her book, Suspect, an insightful and personal look at the aftermath of Columbine, an event that impacted schools and students everywhere, even Vermont. So please welcome Gina Tron.
Thank you so much. So to introduce my book, for anyone who hasn't read anything about it, basically back in 1999, right after Columbine, like days after, I was accused of wanting to shoot up my school, Spalding, and which was part based in something that I did wrong, and also mostly based in hysteria as well. So I had written, me and a friend had written a death threat to someone that we did not mean, but we were dumb enough to put Trenchcoat Mafia on it, swept up in all the stuff that was going on, and we were badly bullied, and this is somebody that was bullying us quite badly. So we did that. So that was obviously not a good thing to do. But also I had written a short story that was taken out of context as like a school shooting manual, or like what I was planning to do when there wasn't like guns or anything in it. So when I approached writing this book, I wanted to write about what happened to me, but not just make it about me, because I know that what happened to me was not a super special or unique situation. It happened and to many students across the country at the time, and then has continued to after shootings in the United States. But I thought that I really wanted to use what happened in my situation and my own mistakes and times when I was not treated very well, was to use it as a jumping off point to talk about the wider issues of this. So when I first started, so the book is memoir, but it's also part journalism. And when I first started, I was way too ambitious. I had hopes that I was going to come up with a thesis about what causes school shootings. And clearly was not able to do that. And I had a few editors tell me, like, that is not, first of all, that's not your place, because you never actually wanted to shoot up your school. You don't really know what it's like to want to do that or to plan that. So you are not in the same category as that. And also, in my true crime writing, I had access to a lot of, because I wrote true crime for a long, like 6 years. And so through that writing, I got to talk to a lot of experts in crime and a lot of criminal profiles. So I was like, I can talk to a lot of these experts, and hopefully they'll be able to give me insight enough to help me form some kind of thesis or ideas that could contribute to this issue. So I'm going to go over how that process went. And what I do know, and what I did find that is disturbing, although none of it's going to be that shocking, I don't think. So a lot of you probably already know about this, but part of the reason that it was so hard to learn so much information about school shootings in general is because school shootings and mass shootings in general are extremely underfunded when it comes to research about them. So the Dickey Amendment, which was spearheaded by the NRA, passed in '96, and it prohibits the CDC from using federal funds to advocate or promote gun control. But more than that, it really limits research about it. So research is not outright banned, but basically. So for decades, it discouraged federal research on gun violence. Anyone that conducted this research had to be extremely careful about their wording and the way that they approached it. And then just a few years ago in 2018, the Congress said that yes, they could research gun violence as a public health issue as long as they did not engage in advocacy. And anyone with a brain knows that this is a very thin line to try to ride. So there was some funding. In 2019, they approved $25 million for gun control research for the first time in decades, which is really shocking. But it didn't. But that's basically it. And in comparison to how big of a problem this is here. Only first world nation that really has this problem to this extent. It's not that much money.
I have a question. Could you actually interview somebody who had been arrested or in jail who was involved in school gun violence?
Could I have?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that law wouldn't have affected that.
I mean, yeah, you can definitely, you're allowed to interview whoever, but it's just like not the federal funds, you know, like, so I could do it independently for sure. And people do that. And there are, and I did talk to some experts that did interview school shooters. So people are doing it, but it's all like, there's just not like federal huge funds dedicated to it that, to the point that probably it deserves. But definitely there is.
Did you ever think about doing that?
Yeah, I mean, I ultimately decided not to interview school shooters for this because I went a different path once I realized I'm not going to be able to talk about what causes school shootings. But I did consider that, and I did talk to families of students that were more along the lines of my situation, where they made threats or were accused of wanting to shoot up their school rather than actually, you know, doing murder. So I talked to Daniel Webster. He's a director of the Center for Gun Policy and Research at Johns Hopkins University. In 2021, he told me that, you know, when you look at the problem of violence, and he's speaking about gun violence specifically in the US and its social cost, and you look at the federal or private funding for the research on it, it is minuscule relative to the social cost. Because I actually went to him hoping that he could give me some insight about copycat threats and more about that, and he's like, I wouldn't be able to even tell you about that because that's a subset topic of this bigger topic, and we don't even know enough about the more important topic, let alone little thing, not little, but in comparison to the big things, my questions that were like more pertaining to me were like, I'm like, how many copycat threats are legitimate? Like how many, you know, how hysterical, like how does hysteria play into that? He's like, oh, that's not even really researched that much. I mean, a little bit here and there, but not to like in the bigger degree that I would have hoped, which was really disappointing for me. But you know, there is obviously some research that has been done, and I really ate up a lot of it. And actually, when I first had this manuscript, it was like, I think it's at like 50,000 words now, but it was like 80 or 90,000. It was a lot more academic or just like research, but my editors were always like, you got to cut this down. It was really drowning out my personal story. And as the book stands now, it's mostly memoir with some journalism weaved in. So the journalism doesn't weigh down the story, which I think is a better read. And I think a lot of people, I think some people want more journalism, but I've gotten a lot of feedback from folks that kind of were just more interested in my personal story. So I talked to, well, actually I did not talk to this expert, but he did profile 48 school shooters in 2015, and only one of them profiled a bully. Actually, I think I'm missing a slide. So before I go into that, so after Columbine, it really created the myth of the bullied school shooter. And I'm not saying that school shooters are never bullied, but when you think about school shooters in the media or in any kind of depiction, or even if you make a joke about, oh, that kid, he could shoot up the school, it's usually someone who's a loner and is bullied. And that's a really dangerous misperception because not only is bullying not the main factor, if it was, there'd be a lot more school shootings or mass shootings in general because a lot of people are bullied. I'm sure, and it shows that some people that do become school shooters are bullied, but it's not the main factor, and it's typically not the reason why they are doing it, or sometimes not even a factor. But the dangerous part about that perception is that it leads to false profiles of school shooters where, you know, assuming that somebody might fit a profile for a school shooter because they've been bullied is a very dangerous thing. And after Columbine, there became a profile, not by the FBI or any formal expert, but there was a profile of school shooters that was mostly happened in the media and just people just chatting with each other, of them listening to a certain kind of music, of them dressing a certain way, and none of this was based in reality at all. And even I, as a 16-year-old who was dumb enough to write a death threat that had Trenchcoat Mafia in it, knew enough to know that what happened at Columbine or any school shooting was rare enough that you cannot predict a next one. There's not enough factors known to be able to predict the next one, or who would do it next. You can't say, oh, well, they listen to this kind of music, so it's probably, that's not really a real factor. So, So yes, in the 48 school shooters he studied, only one of them actually targeted a bully in their shooting. And just a side note, which I touch on in the book too, but like with Columbine, like they didn't care who they were killing. Their first initial goal was one of them wanted to attack like a building in Denver. Like they weren't even going after the school. They just wanted to kill as many people as possible. So, and that was the shooting where people thought at first that it was like revenge of, bullied kids. And that even though that was corrected in the media, sort of, that myth stuck. And it still sticks to today. So, more than half of the shooters that he talked to were actually the bullies. They harassed, intimidated, and threatened people prior to their attacks. And he divided school shooters into 3 categories: psychopathic, psychotic, and traumatized. So 94% of the psychopathic shooters bullied others, which is not a shock. And only 18% of the psychopathic shooters were bullied. So probably not a factor, but it's, 75% of the traumatized shooters were bullied. But again, not the main reason why somebody would do something. So, more than half of the people he talked to weren't bullied at all, and only one of them, again, targeted a bully during their rampage. So I'm not giving this big intro about him because I'm trying to brag or anything, but I'm just trying to show you that I was super hopeful when I got to speak to him, because these are the #1 profilers in the United States. So Mark Safaric worked at the FBI's behavioral analysis unit, and those are the people that like Mindhunter is based on. What's the other show? There's a bunch of Criminal Minds. So these are the people that created the term serial killer, and I've spoken to a few people that work there while working at Oxygen, mostly about serial killers, but I was really hopeful that when I spoke to them, I could get some more insight into what does create a school shooter. And he didn't really have that much insight on that. But first of all, he did tell me this, which I found kind of interesting, but not anything groundbreaking. He said in 2021 that following a shooting, most kids making threats are, just acting out. They're not really capable of killing anyone, and that most don't actually want to kill anyone. They just fantasize about it, maybe. And he said, again, kind of what I already knew intuitively. I think they can empathize or sympathize with the way that some of the shooters have reported feeling, or side note, I think that they've been, perceived to be feeling. Sometimes they didn't actually feel that way, but that's how we treat them or treat their perception in the media. It's just that they won't carry out these actions to that extreme. I think there's a lot of kids out there that have feelings of being bullied or being minimalized, and in a sense they are looking for an outlet. So they see a school shooter and they think this is perhaps a way to express myself. And by express myself, he doesn't mean shoot up their school, but maybe identify or make a copycat threat, thinking that there's some kind of camaraderie there. And I definitely not really consciously thought that when we made that threat, because it was so in the moment and not, we didn't even talk about why we did that. But I definitely did, in the aftermath of Columbine, think of them as more victims of bullying, and I related to them to that. I never condoned what they did, but I felt like I could relate. And so when I asked him about what creates a school shooter, he referred me to the threat assessment perspective by the FBI, which anyone can read this online. It's available. And it was created shortly after Columbine. So that kind of lets you know how little has evolved if he's referring me back to this document. And again, it was both very validating to see this in there, but also disturbing that what they've come up with is no more defined than what I knew at age 16, minus assuming that bullying played a bigger role. So it said in the document, violence, it's a complex issue with complex causes and consequences. Imagining that there are easy answers and instant solutions is counterproductive. There is no easy way to attack the causes and no simple formula that can predict who will commit a violent act. And and then I just put a little bit of footage from when I was, when I got in trouble. This is Marcellus Parsons, as we all know. And that was the top of the news when when we were going through our situation. And here's another news outlet from the Times Argus. And I later worked at both of these places, which is kind of odd, but yeah. And then there's a picture of me at that age. So.
Well, clearly you listened to Marilyn Manson.
And that's part of the profile, yeah.
That's right.
And it really kind of was back then too, where like Marilyn Manson, lo and behold, he is a bad guy, but not for the reason that they said back then. Like he wasn't causing school shootings. And it was so funny that Columbine caused such a hatred and fear of him when the killers didn't even listen to him at all. It was more, they listened to other music that was kind of in the same genre, a little more industrial, but not specifically Marilyn Manson. But there's the baby school shooter. So I guess I'll read a couple passages, unless anyone has any questions or wants to know anything.
Question, are they all men?
School shooters? Yeah. I think there's been just a few females. Well, one of the first ones, I think it was in the late 70s or early 80s. It's Boomtown Rats song, I Don't Like Mondays is based on her. She shot her principal and a few other students. That was a rare case. Most of them are men or white boys. Men. White men. Yep. I guess like most violence and but there was one female school shooter in the last year. In November, December. But mostly men.
It seems like in a kind of healthy society, it would be a public health issue. Is that talked about at all? Or clearly the legislation banning it means you can't treat it as a public health issue. But.
Yeah, obviously there's always people fighting for it to be taken more seriously and for more resources to be devoted to it. And specifically with like the gun control side of it too. I know that some of the relatives, basically there's a club you never want to be in, but like relatives of some of the victims of like the Aurora movie theater shooting, who I interviewed her, mother of one of the victims. She is like connected with a lot of the other shooting victims' families, and they all kind of band together, not all, but a lot of them band together to try to get more rights, more attention and more pro-gun control laws changed. Any other questions?
So all that awful stuff did happen to you? All that high school bullying and Sarah and all that? That's...
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
that's all... Wow, sorry.
No, it's all. Well, I think my case was a little extreme, but I feel like everyone kind of goes through it to varying degrees. And my husband's here. He was also in my class, so he can vouch for some of the. But the 90s was, I guess, people don't really change, but I felt like, I don't know, the 90s could be cruel in ways that other times weren't. And, I did have to, in some places I, took some liberties because like I can't verbatim, remember the quotes. But I did also tone people down a little bit because I felt like some of the viciousness wouldn't have been believed. And I tried to give people more credit than they maybe even deserve. Like even with Sarah, I didn't want to just paint her as a complete villain, even though she kind of is in the story. But she had good qualities too, just like, everyone does.
Yeah, I went to Spalding in the 60s.
Oh, yeah.
And it was a little different then. And we had our mean girls and bullies and prom issues and things like that.
Yeah, some things just don't change, and and I sometimes feel like every class is like and I've realized this with like through teaching. I feel like every class has its own like vibe kind of sometimes. Like some classes have a nicer vibe than others, and we had a particularly mean class. I mean, we're friends with a lot of the people we went to high school now, and I've been really lucky that a lot of the people that were mean to me, and obviously not all, have supported me in the years after this, and have apologized, and also are very supportive of this book. So, which is also validating, and because if anybody could be defensive or be like, oh, she's exaggerating or whatever, they would be them. And I was worried about that because it's hard to trust my own teenage perception because I'm a teenager. Everything's bigger in my head than reality. So I'm like, how much more amplified is this? Like, where is the reality? Where do I see the line of like the truth? And so that took me a lot of stress. That was a lot of stress for me. But I think I did a good job because it's okay if somebody complains, but there hasn't been anybody doubting or that I'm aware of or, challenging my perception. And a lot of people that went to high school with us have read it. And yeah.
When I read the long article by Linda Radke, made me kind of mad because there seemed to be a lot of trashing of Barry and Spalding, but in the book it wasn't that much. It wasn't that bad. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I really tried to not do, it was hard to because, and also I live in Barry now. We just bought a house in Barry, which was not the plan when I was writing this book, obviously. But I don't think, and I think that was one of my fears of the book coming out too, is I feel like, and understandably, that Barry could feel offended by this or bashed. And I don't think that what happened to me was because of Barry. I think this was happening across the country. And I try to make that clear in the book. I tried to accurately paint Barry as it was to me, which was not a happy place for me back then, and not be untrue to my young self, but also not be unfair to Barry. So I tried to paint it as I saw it, but also try to make it clear that this was happening across the country. This is not happening just in Barry. I think that Barry has its own special things, good and bad, that amplified this. Or I think in any small town, this is probably what would happen. But Barry has some, yeah.
Well, and going off all that, one of the things I love about the book is every time you start making, talking about Sarah and it gets darker, then all of a sudden you'll turn it on yourself and then you'll reveal something about you, and then you do that for a little bit, and then it seems like you're, shining a light on yourself, and then you turn it, like you're always making a complex prism of people in place, and I thought that was really cool. It never felt like you're here and Sarah is there and the other people. Anytime I was getting a comfortable perspective, you changed it and challenged who you were, who they were, who the town was, and I thought that was just awesome.
Oh, well, thank you. I love that. Well, I'm glad. That was definitely the goal, was like, I think if I wrote this in my 20s, when it was still so fresh and I was still so defensive about it, and I still very much did not, was still fighting that reputation. And I mean, people were still calling me bomb threat girl and school shooter girl until I was 30. So, I was, if I wrote it when I was younger, not to my face as much, but they were still saying it. I would have been more focused on setting the story straight and trying to show that I am innocent, that I did not want to shoot up the school, instead of really showing my ugliness too, because I'm not like some perfect victim in this situation. Yes, I was a victim in the sense that I was bullied badly, but I also played a role, and I thought that it would be unfair for me to write about this and also would be an injustice to this topic if I didn't talk about my own attraction to I don't mean like physical attraction, but my own attraction to school shooters in here, and being like, oh, well, they were bullied. I could see why somebody would do that, because I think that a lot of people misguidedly, feel that empathy for people like that because they see themselves in it. And yeah, I really wanted to give everyone, show the good and like the nuances of people, including myself. And it was really hard to sometimes to, fight the urge to want to polish myself, to be, perfect and to be like good all the time, but that's not real. And I had a lot of problematic thinking, and I did make mistakes, and yeah. So I will dive into the book unless anybody has any other questions.
A quick one. How do you think that technology and social media have affected this issue, either positively or negatively?
That's a great question. I think it's probably both. I don't know, but I feel like rumors and bullying is like taking different forms probably, and like elevated. So I think, so in some ways it's that plays a role into bullying more, but also like I think that the kids now are more sophisticated too because of all that, in a way, maybe. But I go back and forth on that, especially as someone who has been teaching. I kind of go, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. But I think it does have an impact, obviously. But I don't know to what degree. But that's a really great question.
But when you were in high school, there wasn't the opportunity to bully people on Facebook and things like that, right?
No, we were just, so when this happened, like AIM, like AOL was just kind of starting. So people were harassing me on AOL Messenger, but it wasn't like, it's not like people could like share photos of me and like retweet them or like, TikToks. It wasn't as sophisticated, the technology. So there was some online bullying going on for sure, but I actually wonder sometimes if my situation would have been better or worse now. I don't know. It's a really good question. So I'm going to read I'll start with the more embarrassing section that has research in it. Oh, this is such an embarrassing section, but I'm going to do it. Here's something I've been embarrassed about for most of my life. In senior year, I joined an online message board for people obsessed with the Columbine killers. I felt aligned with them and wanted an outlet. To the best of my recollection, my thought process went, if they had been classmates of mine, they would have understood the pain I was going through and would never have ostracized me like my actual peer group did. One hot topic on the message board was the buzz of anticipation surrounding the basement tapes. These were videotapes that the killers had made in hopes that they'd be widely available to the public. They wanted people like me, like us, to be inspired, not unlike other sorts of terrorists bent on recruitment. I began posting regularly on the message board and struck up a friendship with a goth girl from Ireland. She felt connected to Dylan Klebold, whom she saw deprived of love, a feeling she could relate to. We exchanged physical addresses, and she sent me a handwritten letter addressed to Elka. In it, she included all sorts of details about how cute she thought her favorite shooter was. I felt bonded to him and his friend because I saw them as victims, a notion I later vehemently discarded. Back then, I thought the people that they shot were victims as well, but a different kind of victim, not the kind I identified with. The letter from my pen pal included some photos of her. She sat in a verdant field wearing loose-fitted black velvet dress, a scowl on her face, black circles setting off her baby blue eyes. She looked so cool, I wish she lived nearby. I hid the envelopes and its contents at the bottom of a shoebox under letters from my old friends on Long Island. A few months later, I became paranoid and tore up the Irish girl's letter. I was scared that someone would find it and conclude that the rumors had been true, that I really had wanted to massacre my classmates. The fact was that despite my empathy for the kind of people I thought the Columbine killers were, I never believed their actions were right. I did wonder, though, if being pushed hard enough could make me capable of murdering my tormentors. On the other hand, if that were the case, shouldn't I have erupted by now? I checked myself for homicidal urges, but didn't discover any. I did have dreams in which I played the role of shooter, but always in the aftermath of slaughter. It was never me with a sawed-off shotgun pumping rounds into people. Instead, I was being interrogated about the murders I'd allegedly committed. I'd always be confused because I couldn't remember them. Eventually, by the end of senior year, I did start to have some fleeting fantasies of shooting up Spalding, but I'd suppress them pretty fast. I thought that I was maybe capable of it, that possibly all humans have murderous violence in us, but I also knew that path just wasn't for me. This might have something to do with the fact that all my pessimism about my future social life couldn't extinguish a spark of hope. I thought that there had to be a world where I could find success, even if, for the moment, I had no idea where to get there. I had other fantasies, too, that were much more naive, of being popular but doing it right, moving up the social ladder while being kind. I'd often watch the ending of Heathers and smile. I loved when Veronica ripped the scrunchie out of her popular frenemy's hair and sternly said, "There's a new sheriff in town," before befriending a badly bullied classmate. Beyond the phenomenon of online fan sites like the message board I joined, there's a great deal of evidence suggesting that the fantasy of connecting with school shooters is widespread, amongst adolescent girls in particular. If anything, it has increased since the years since Columbine. For example, Nicholas Cruz, perpetrator of the 2018 massacre that left 17 dead at his Florida high school, received stacks of fan mail and even love letters, many penned by teenage girls. One wrote, "I'm 18 years old. I'm a senior in high school. When I saw you on TV, something attracted me to you." Broward County Public Defender Howard Finkelstein, whose office represented Cruz, told a reporter for a local paper that the letters chilled him. Why? Because they were written by people he considered to be normal. "The letters shake me up," he said, "because they are written by regular, everyday teen girls from across the nation. That scares me. It's perverted." Online groups that sprouted after the Parkland shooting included one called Nicholas Cruz, the First Victim. This was a private group with hundreds of members, many of whom use hashtags like Stop Bullying. Though in all likelihood some of these people do condone murder, I very much doubt that all of them do. I speculate that an important subset may entertain the same type of misguided empathy that I felt for the Columbine shooters. Despite evidence from studies that have found an absence of any obvious correlation between bullying and mass murder, the legend of such a connection remains powerful. Those who have been bullied have an extra incentive to invest in stories of shooters as heroic underdogs, and girls in particular feel empathy for them. James Haddon, a sociologist and Center for Peace Studies and Violence Prevention at Virginia Tech, told me in 2021 that while males look to school shooters to identify and learn from, females lean towards understanding and empathizing with them. Despite the role that social media has played in offering a forum to fans of murders, the fandom itself is hardly a new phenomenon. Between the time that serial killer Ted Bundy was apprehended in 1978 and his execution in 1989, he received piles of fan mail and marriage proposals. Susan Klebold's memoir reveals that she was flooded with love letters for her son Dylan. Decades after Columbine, its legend lives on. Quote, "I care more about Eric and Dylan than I do about 90% of the people around me," a 17-year-old girl who goes by Reb420 Angel posted on Tumblr. She was born in 1999, the year of the shootings. She's just one of the many female admirers who continue to gather on social media, bonding over their fantasies of how cool, cute, and tormented they believe the teenage killers were. That's that portion. No. Some water. I don't know what to say after reading that, but any questions?
I enjoyed the part about, you crushing on this guy for years and years and years.
Oh, this guy?
Yeah, something like that, but then about 10 years later, you found out he was gay.
Oh.
You should have just told me. But back in the 60s, so, you know, it wasn't quite
Well, it sounds like you've found someone that was actually can hurt you at least.
right.
At least he was nice, I hope.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I don't know, I'm older, so it was even before, things got quite so, but I don't remember any shootings in my high school the whole time I was there. And I'm just wondering, it was in a fairly well-to-do suburb of Chicago. So, do you think class has something to do with where these things happen?
I don't know. I mean, I feel like a lot of them happen in middle class. It looks like the ones that like the mass ones, not ones that are like one or two people get shot, but the mass ones where like people are shot indiscriminately seem to happen in often middle class or upper middle class areas. Maybe somewhere slightly lower middle class, but yeah, it doesn't seem like poverty does.
First, that there was really anything like that. It wasn't about, when Columbine happened, my friend's mom came and woke us up. Like, this thing happened, like almost like a 9/11 thing. And
Agree,
nobody goes and wakes you up now if there's a school.
Right. Everyone's like, oh, another one. And people don't remember the names of the schools anymore. Columbine has become like an icon, a negative icon for these things. Because, yeah, I think everyone kind of remembers where they were.
It was really, I mean, there was that like Blue Monday girl, that girl that didn't like Mondays or something.
And there was a few other ones in the 90s too, but they weren't as big. And it wasn't like a moment, like you said. Like, it wasn't like people remember it. It wasn't talked about for weeks and weeks in the news cycle on and on.
Things where there's metal detectors
Yep.
and drills and stuff, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's changed the perception, and even if it wasn't like, it still was still so rare, it completely changed the course of everything.
Well, I think that there was discussion, decisions made about how the press should handle the reporting of these kinds of things, because when somebody is willing to die, right, to kill and then die, then they might, become a martyr or a hero or something like that. And if everybody knows about them, then they could become some kind of figure.
Yeah.
If the media doesn't play up that news event, and for better or for worse, these events kind of go under the radar, then the theory was it gives an individual less incentive to go out in the blaze of glory. I think there's actually a term for it when you go out by cops shooting you.
Suicide prevention.
Yep.
Uh-huh. Yeah, so I thought that was actually what do you do? And that, what do you do? What does society do? Because we seem to be of the notion, right, in crime and punishment, we're thinking that if the group knows what the punishment is for a crime, then it's less likely for somebody to do that crime. But in this case, it would be the opposite.
Right. No, for sure. And like, I know especially with school shootings and mass shootings in general, like they didn't really have that insight back then to like know that how contagious it was. That it was as contagious, not as contagious, but it had a contagion effect in the same way, in a similar way that suicide does. So with Columbine, it was just like nonstop media coverage, and really was making these guys into martyrs and for people to follow or idolize. And now in the last few years, there's been a few campaigns called like Don't Name Them. It's an FBI campaign, and it's media is getting more savvy about taking these leads and listening and not reporting it as heavily. So there has been definitely some change in how it's handled with the media coverage, which is good. I mean, it's like they still release their names, but they're not like having listicles anymore where it's like 10 things, I mean, some sources still are, but not like the main places, like 10 things to know about this school shooter's upbringing with like plastered with lots of photos of them like they used to. They are subduing that just because there's been evidence that shows that there is a contagion effect, and that school shooters will copy each other, and especially Columbine. And here I spoke to someone from the FBI that said that especially with Columbine, even though it's been so many years, I think it is because it was so heavily publicized that they still want to try to beat that record or whatever, and get that level of infamy is I think their hope in a lot of cases.
What happens when you talk to school age kids about your story?
So far, I've gotten some good feedback. I've talked to actually one of our old classmates. He teaches college, undergrad, and I've talked to them about this a few times. And I have one friend who's been teaching and showing them an article I wrote about this. And I think, they seem to respond well to it. I won't know if they don't, but I'm not privy to that. But
I would just think it would be. Well, I don't know. I don't know what kids today are thinking, right? Which is also another reason why it's probably very difficult to ever identify who might be a threat when they're so young. Because I think all of our whatever teenage cohorts, right? We're all our own subculture, and every year we are changing with different music and imagery and fashion and things that come along. It's sort of like how can we ever understand each other?
Right. No, absolutely. What maybe was a signpost for me in the 90s, it would not be the same for me to understand. If I was teaching a group of students, as much as I would love to believe that I can understand and relate to them and that I'm approachable, I'm completely out of the loop. I don't know exactly what it's like to be a student now, and never will. And it's so hard to know. It evolves so fast, and especially with social media and stuff, it evolves so fast. I can't keep up. So it makes me feel really old. I always feel like that. Particularly when I'm teaching at Norwich, there's a meme of the backwards hat with a skateboard. It's like, hello, fellow children. That's how I feel anytime I try to be relatable. I'm like, they're not thinking I'm cool or relatable. They don't. Yeah.
That's so weird. They always think I'm so cool.
Do you have another thing you wanted to read?
Let me see. I think we have time. Let me just take another sip of water. I feel like whenever I'm reading.
You said you read the most embarrassing one first.
I guess, they're all embarrassing in their own special ways, but the being on a message board is so embarrassing. I really was embarrassed when with that letter. I was like, someone's going to find this, or I'm going to die prematurely in college, and someone's going to find this letter and be like, wow, she really was a monster. So this is from the name of this chapter is called Infamy. Tell Saddam not to bother making a bomb because Gina Tron is going to crush the prom. So when I woke up, that song was stuck in my head. I lay there replaying the moment when two Spalding boys had sung it at me. My digital alarm clock said 8:55. It was Friday, May 7th, the first morning of Tanya and I's 3-day off-the-record suspension. On Monday and Tuesday, we'd have in-school suspension, but today we were required to stay home. School officials wanted to ensure our absence from the scene of the date when our rumored plot to shoot up school was supposed to be implemented. I did not want to get up. I remained horizontal and scanned my crowded walls. There were so many posters and magazine clippings of Courtney Love and Marilyn Manson and anonymous models in thick black eyeliner that there was little bare wall left. I heard the landline start to ring downstairs, a slight delay, and my own phone lit up. Groggily, I answered. "Fuck you," said a young male voice, then a dial tone. Another one. I crawled back under the covers. The phone rang again. I picked up, but this time it didn't offer a greeting. "Gina?" It was Tanya. She suggested that she drive over We may as well hang out together. Feeling a weird mix of dread and excitement, I showered and dressed. My mind dwelt on the remarkable fact that everyone in town was likely thinking about me, but all the same, I knew nothing had changed. Nobody was going to hear my side of the story. At school, doors were locked and police were there. The atmosphere must be tense. I figured some kids had stayed home, all because of that note. Or was it the Elks Club story? Tanya arrived and said, "There are eggs on your house." "Yeah, I know." "When did that happen?" "Day before yesterday," I said. I thought of the mess on the side of our house that faced the dirt road. Little pieces of white shell were stuck in dried yellow ooze. "There's just so much going on," I said. "It's overwhelming." "Totally, I get it." Tanya plopped into a kitchen chair. "This is so fucking stupid. We've never even shot any guns," I said. "We're probably just about the only people in school who don't have guns in our houses. But Sarah has plenty thanks to her racist dad." Tanya corrected me. "My brother has guns under his bed." Oh, it made sense. He'd recently joined the military. "Rifles, my grandfather's old ones," she said. "Do they work?" I felt confused. Did she want us to use them, or was I starting to get as paranoid as all the rumor mongers? She said she didn't think they were usable. "Well, a lot of our classmates bring their hunting rifles to school," I said, agitated, talking fast, like not into school, but they leave them in the parking lot. I remembered the rifle racked in that old pickup with the Sublime sticker, the one I stared at while the policeman questioned me. "Aren't they more likely than us to do something like Columbine?" I went on. "And what about Kyle Benoit? He's been building pipe bombs since 5th grade. You know who I'm talking about. Tanya nodded. I looked out the kitchen window to the open expanse of land that filled up with tall grass in the summer and in winter hosted a snowmobile trail. Once while I was eating a bowl of cereal, I looked through that window and spotted our 12-year-old neighbor pointing a rifle at the sky. That had given me a jolt. And I wanted to feel some electricity on my prom night too, even if it was uncomfortable. Under any circumstances, there was an aura to prom, a legendary quality that had all the crazy rumors had only intensified. It felt like there had to be a climax, and I craved the chance to experience that, or at least witness that. "I think we should still go out," I said. "Before prom, in our dresses. I really want to wear my damn dress." I'd been looking forward to that moment for so long, saving up my allowance for months to pay for that garment. Long and tight, made of baby blue velvet, it had a low-cut top with tiny straps. Tanya agreed. We could go out to dinner before our curfew started. "Yeah, I could see the possibilities." I said, "If any of our supposedly scared classmates see us, maybe they'll think we're going to prom after all, and they'll spread that around." We laughed, cheered by the realization that being excluded from the main event didn't mean we couldn't have an impact. Still giddy from our role in last night's local news broadcast, we couldn't wait to see how the newspaper would cover all the craziness we'd helped set in motion. I hoped we'd be prominently featured, maybe with a focus on my Elks Club story. The minute I saw the paper delivery jeep speeding up our road, churning up like dirt like tiny tornadoes, I turned to Tanya. "Let's take a walk." Reaching our mailbox, I yanked the paper out and took a look. "First page," I said, and not only that, it was the very top item. The headline read, "All is calm at Spalding," over a subhead, 304 students stay out of school today. The story emphasized the confidence of both police and school officials that rumors of plans to unleash violence in the school or the prom were completely unfounded. At the same time, it stressed all the measures being taken to make sure everyone feels safe and, quote, "demonstrate that we're taking this seriously," as the principal put it. He was given space to debunk some of the more bizarre rumors, telling reporters that, quote, "There was no crucifix with a black trench coat planted in the lawn in front of the school. There was no bomb found in the popcorn machine, and no evidence that the school's Bosnian students were plotting revenge for the NATO air assault on Yugoslavia." The final item in the list referenced the fact that several Bosnian students who came to Barry as refugees were supposed to be joining up with me to spread mayhem. The most direct nods in our direction were lines about, quote, "the discovery of a threatening note on a student's car," and, quote, "the revelation of a short story authored by another student." The article closed with comments from our classmates. "My first kiss's brother claimed to be genuinely frightened and thought school should be canceled. Another suggested that some had deliberately spread stories in hopes of getting a day off. I passed the paper to Tanya, who read as she smoked. We were now back on the lawn in front of my egg-besmirched house. We need to get scrapbooks to keep track of this, she said. That's a great idea. I wonder if they have them at the mall. We'll have to go and see. Well, maybe not now, but in a few days when this calms down. Next, I called Crystal, because she still kept her connection with us while mostly hanging out with somewhat popular kids. She could provide information that we couldn't get any other way. I wanted the inside dirt on what was going on at school. She reported that things were strange. She'd only stayed for one period. Strange how, I asked. Eerie, I mean, obviously some people were making a big joke of it, but other people were wearing football helmets in case of gunfire. I laughed. Nothing eventful happened, she said, at least while I was there. But Gina, a lot of people and their parents, they want you expelled. They'll attack you if you show up at prom. At least that's the talk. Despite, or maybe because of her warning, I felt like showing up at the Elks Club just to see. Again, I had that craving for a jolt of excitement. As Friday wore on, we joked about dressing up, bringing suitcases to prom, suitcases plastered with stickers of guns, and we'd fill them with candy. This is so stupid. And with all of the drama circling us, touched off by our actions, it didn't make sense to stay on the sidelines. We joked, but part of me really wanted to do it. Saturday came. Before dressing for a prom that I would not attend, I perused the day's paper. Another front page article revealed that on Friday, Spalding had been, quote, as normal as it could be. Mostly a rehash of the previous coverage, it nevertheless included a few more details about security measures planned for the Elks Club. There would be police patrol, and someone at the door would check students for weapons. I put on my blue velvet dress, adding black fishnet armbands and elastic around the middle fingers. Feeling loosed from all restraints, I applied even more black eyeliner than usual. My lashes were black and thick, as if coated with tar. While I always made up my eyes, I noticed that when I styled them the way I wanted, people got on my case even more. But now that there seemed to be so little relation between my behavior and reactions, I figured I might as well do as I please. Mom walked into the room as I globbed black lipstick onto my lips and said, "You know, Gina, after this weekend, you should probably tone things down, just to keep a low profile." I said, "But that's like giving up or giving in." "Well, it might make your life a little easier." I wasn't convinced. "You know, I'm not one to hinder your self-expression, right, Gina?" I had to agree. "So, can you please, for me, once prom is over, just go without black makeup and dog collars, especially no Marilyn Manson shirts, just for a few weeks?" I sighed. I knew that Marilyn Manson concerts were being canceled, especially those scheduled anywhere in Colorado, out of respect for the Columbine victims. We would later mock that decision, insisting that the lyrics to the widely adored pop hit Livin' La Vida Loca were far more disturbing. Quote, "It will make you go insane, like a bullet to your brain." Why was that respectable fare? Reluctantly, I agreed to do as my mom said, just for a little bit, even though I couldn't see what good it would do. I said no when she renewed her proposal to transfer me to another school where I could start over. My loyalty to Tanya didn't waver. I didn't want to leave her behind, as I don't think she had the option to leave. I couldn't bear the thought of never seeing Evan again, either. In fact, I didn't want to do anything that could be read as an admission of guilt, but there was more to it than that. The fact was, the whole thing felt kind of good, like poking at a bruise. Mom drove me to Tanya's. We didn't talk. I turned on the radio. All Star by Smash Mouth was playing. It was probably the 4th or 5th time I heard the song, which was just starting to be played everywhere. A few lines spoke directly to me. "Well, the years start coming and they don't stop coming. Fed to the rules and I hit the ground running." I thought of all the years I was in love with Evan, all the years I spent trying to fit in. Then I pictured my classmates running, trying to dodge a rain of bullets. This is a fantasy that not only terrifies them, but secretly attracts them, I thought. Everyone needs a villain, and they made me one. "Be safe," my mom said. Her green eyes squinted in a sunlight that made them sparkle. Tanya was in her kitchen when I got in, grabbing a soda from the fridge. She told me my dress looked awesome. She'd applied black lipstick, which made me happy. Confirmation, I thought, that the two of us were united in our status as Spalding's oddballs. But she wasn't wearing any makeup, and instead of her prom dress, she had on a long black skirt. I guess she wasn't able to bring herself to put on the dress when we weren't even going. My own disappointment was intense. I'd watched so many prom movies, and they all contributed to my vision of prom as a rite of passage. For years, I'd fantasized about a prom experience along the lines of Pretty in Pink. Now prom was here, and I had to admit that on some level, it did feel like I was in a movie, but not a very good one. We got Tanya's mom to take our prom photos, in quotes. Grinning, we posed with copies of the newspapers reporting on our ordeal. Then we went out to our prom dinner date at a cheap steak restaurant that was a fixture in town. On the way there, Tanya told me that her aunt's family in Michigan was going through more or less the same thing. Her cousin, a high school senior, was suspended after calling in a bomb threat. It wasn't clear if he was serious or not. I guess it runs in the family, I said. Tanya laughed and said the whole thing was surreal. I just can't believe it's happening. I'm really sorry you're getting the worst of it. I shrugged and said it wasn't her fault. I mean, it kind of is. Yeah, and it's my fault for writing the Elks Club book. Let's just blame Sarah. Yeah, if she was so scared, like she told the police, why is she spreading those rumors? And a fake hit list, she said. We pulled into the restaurant's parking lot. Around us, classmates in long, fluffy, Easter egg-colored gowns were floating into the restaurant. I noticed their hems dragging on the pavement. My heart began beating hard. I wanted to tell Tanya to drive back to her house, but at the same time, I wanted to leap out of the car and give my richly adorned classmates the scare they deserved. The urge to chase them was strong and new and surprising. To retreat or terrorize, of course, we did neither. We went inside and sat down. Our faces stoic, we ordered steak. The waitress was rude to us, and at the neighboring tables, we could hear some of our classmates loudly debating whether we were barred from prom. Margie says if they show up at the Elks Club, they'll be arrested or even worse, said a girl with her auburn hair in an updo. Her yellow floral pattern dress reminded me of wallpaper. Hideous, I thought. If everyone was going to judge me for what I wore, maybe it was time for me to judge them back. I stared at her until her eyes met mine. Heart pounding, I winked at her. Her eyes got big and then she looked away. She shut her mouth and picked up a fork, which she held awkwardly. I'd made someone cower. This was new. This recognition I had some power to do this to someone. It felt strange but nice, kind of nice. I was so used to cowering myself, being on the receiving end of others' intimidation. I didn't even know who this person's last name, yet I was on her mind. And then I said my power lay in my notoriety. Not that notorious, but, you know. When we got back from dinner, we changed out of our fancy outfits, and later that night, Tanya's mom took us to get ice cream, the supervised outing being permissible under the terms of our curfew. As we stood in line waiting for our treats, people driving by yelled psycho and killer. We retreated to Tanya's and watched Practical Magic about two witch sisters who lived in a closed-minded town. As relevant as the subject matter was to our own situation, I completely lost interest. Right now, real life was a lot more exciting than any movie. I felt like I'd rather rewatch the news story about us. After the movie, Mom picked me up. At home in my bed, I lay wide awake. As I listened to rain and wind slam on the house, I couldn't stop thinking about prom. Were there really armed parents staking out the parking lot? Were we the number one conversation? I pictured the scene inside the Elks Club with all the dancing couples. I'd always hoped I'd get to slow dance with someone at prom. Which of my classmates were making out right now? Who was having sex? Deep teenage thoughts. As thunder sounded in the distance, I cried myself to sleep. Okay. Thank you.
I think the book is really honest. It's not a fake, someone pretending to have been a teenager and doing something like. And especially because I worked at Spalding, and I could update you, there were more bomb threats, and they were written in the bathroom stalls, and the approach was a little different. But anyway, I love the communication with your mom being such an ally, such an advocate. That was a very moving part, I like that. And that, you know, there were some real good connections that you made there too, that helped you go through. And I'm just so glad about the ending and who you are and what you've accomplished now. So that is a really upbeat situation. So.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for writing.
Thank you. Yeah, I feel really lucky that I've been able to, channel this into something positive, and I feel, really, really lucky about that, because I feel like a lot of people that have these feelings or go through some of this, they don't really have an outlet, or, or maybe they do, but they just don't find it, and so I'm really grateful for everyone who has read it or wants to read it, and for coming tonight and listening to this. So thank you so much.
Really well written. It feels very engaging and clear.
Oh, yay.
Yeah.
Yay. Well, I'm glad.
And the research was good. I'm glad that you put the research in there, because it made it like a serious read also. This is someone's memoir. Of course, that makes it serious and makes it weight, but it also lets you know what was happening in that environment, If you don't understand, if you've never been in a high school, if you've never worked with high school students, you miss a lot of that. So those two voices were very strong and were very good. So I'm glad you put the research in there. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, and then I also have copies here if anyone's interested. But no.
Thank you. To my sister. She was a year younger than me, and totally different. Went to all the proms, was a cheerleader, and we weren't that close. We're closer now.
Siblings always get closer. Not always, but it's easier to deal with siblings the older I am. Well, kind of. It goes back and forth.
What did you do?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.